What happened when a master tailor in 14th century London grew too old to thread a needle, his eyesight dimming, his hands shaking? Where did a master baker in 13th century Paris go when his back gave out from years of kneading dough? Unable to tend the ovens, did they simply fade away, forgotten and destitute? Number 8. Legal and protective advocacy. Life in the medieval towns and cities could be harsh, and the path of an aging tradesperson, even one who had built a respectable life, was never without its unexpected turns. Beyond the direct provision of coins or a roof overhead, medieval guilds offered their elder members a less tangible but equally crucial form of support: vigorous legal and protective advocacy. This meant standing up for their rights, arbitrating disputes, and shielding them from the sometimes predatory forces of the era. A guild was not just a collective of craftsmen, it was a powerful, recognized legal entity within the urban landscape. It held charters, often granted by kings or lords, which gave it a defined legal standing. This standing extended to its members, creating a protective shield that was especially valuable for those no longer at the peak of their physical or mental prowess. An aging member might find himself vulnerable to unscrupulous landlords, dishonest debtors, or even opportunistic family members. The guild stepped in, acting as a powerful advocate. Consider the case of a master tanner in a German city, perhaps Augsburg, sometime in the late 1300s. He had spent decades working with hides, the acrid smell of the tannery ingrained in his clothes, his hands rough and scarred. As he approached his twilight years, his hearing began to fail, and his steps grew unsteady. A dispute arose with a local merchant over a long-standing debt for a large consignment of cured leather. The merchant, seeing the tanner's advanced age and perhaps assuming a diminished capacity to fight back, attempted to deny the debt, claiming the leather was of poor quality. Without the guild, this old tanner might have faced a drawn-out, expensive, and ultimately losing battle. Individual recourse in medieval courts was a labyrinthine process, costly and often skewed against those without influence. But this tanner was a respected, long-standing member of his guild, the Brotherhood of Tanners. He brought his grievance to the guildmasters. The guild did not hesitate. Its elected officials, often seasoned masters themselves, understood the importance of protecting a member's honor and livelihood. They had the collective funds to hire a skilled clerk, or even a legal representative, rare and valuable commodities in that era, to argue the tanner's case before the town council or the local magistrate. They could present the guild's meticulous records of transactions, quality standards, and the tanner's long history of impeccable craftsmanship. The very presence of guild representatives, backed by the collective power and reputation of the entire organization, lent immense weight to the tanner's claim. They were a unified, disciplined force, not easily intimidated. The merchant, facing not just one old man but the wrath of an entire powerful guild, often quickly backed down, settling the debt or facing guild-imposed boycotts that could cripple his trade. This type of advocacy also extended to protecting the property and assets of aging members. Many guilds maintained a common chest, a treasury built from member dues, fines, and donations. This common chest was not just for direct financial aid, it was also used to defend the guilds, and thus its members' legal rights. If an elderly master craftsman, say a goldsmith, owned a valuable workshop and tools, and some opportunistic relative tried to lay false claim to them, the guild would intervene. They might send their beadle, a guild officer, to assert the master's ownership. They could provide the legal counsel needed to draw up wills and other documents, ensuring the master's wishes for his property were honored and his heirs, perhaps a widowed spouse or a young apprentice, were protected. Within the guild itself, disputes sometimes arose among members. even those who had worked side by side for decades. An aging master might have a disagreement with a younger journeyman over terms of apprenticeship, or a boundary dispute with a neighboring guild member over shared property. Rather than resorting to external courts, which were slow, expensive, and often biased, the guild offered an internal arbitration system. Guild masters, drawing on their deep understanding of the craft and their long experience with guild customs and rules, would sit as a sort of informal court. They heard both sides of the story, consulted guild statutes, and rendered a judgment. This system was generally swift, fair, and binding. For an elder member, this meant they did not have to navigate the complexities and potential abuses of the formal legal system. They could rely on respected peers to resolve conflicts, upholding the guild's internal harmony and ensuring that no member, particularly a vulnerable elder, was taken advantage of. There were also instances where guilds protected their members from external threats from authorities. Royal taxes, local levies, or attempts by feudal lords to exert undue control over urban trade could threaten the livelihoods of all members, especially those whose businesses were already less robust due to age. Guilds collectively lobbied, petitioned, and even directly negotiated with higher powers. They argued for exemptions, fairer taxes, or the preservation of their chartered rights. While this benefited all members, it disproportionately helped the older ones, who might not have the financial resilience to absorb sudden economic shocks or the energy to fight such battles alone. A sudden new levy on candles, for instance, might barely impact a young, thriving chandler, but it could bankrupt an older one whose business was already slowing. The collective voice of the guild, representing hundreds of voting citizens and vital economic contributors, was a far more powerful instrument than any individual plea. Consider the example of a guild of fishmongers in late medieval London. Their trade was vital to the city, but they often faced harsh regulations concerning prices, quality, and the transportation of goods. An aging fishmonger, perhaps suffering from rheumatism, might find it increasingly difficult to meet stringent market demands or handle the physical labor of hauling fresh catches. If local authorities imposed a new unreasonable fine for a minor infraction, the guild would step in. They would argue that the fine was unjust, that their member had adhered to standards as best as his ability allowed, and that the guild had a vested interest in the livelihood of all its members. They might appeal to the mayor or alderman, reminding them of the fishmonger's long service to the city and the guild's consistent contributions to the city's food supply. This collective action protected the individual from what might otherwise be crippling penalties, allowing them to continue their trade even if at a reduced capacity and maintain their dignity and income. Furthermore, guilds often provided a form of security for their members against false accusations or slander. In a time when reputation was paramount, a malicious rumor could ruin a craftsman's business, particularly for an older master who relied on established clientele and trust. If an aging master shoemaker was accused of shoddy work or deceit, the guild would launch an internal investigation. They would examine the evidence, consult with other masters, and if the accusation proved false, they would publicly defend their member. They might issue a formal declaration, vouch for the master's integrity, and even impose fines or social ostracism on the accuser. This defensive character was not just about the individual. It was about protecting the guild's collective reputation for quality and honesty, which was built upon the integrity of its long-standing members. For an elder, whose physical strength might have waned, the protection of their name and professional standing was invaluable, preserving their ability to earn a living and maintain their place in the community. Guilds also acted as an internal mechanism for ensuring that apprentices and journeymen treated their aging masters with respect and fairness. The rules of apprenticeship were strict, and an apprentice was bound to serve his master diligently. If an aging master, perhaps less physically imposing, was mistreated or neglected by his apprentice, the guild would intervene. They would enforce the terms of the apprenticeship, levy fines on the apprentice, or even terminate the apprenticeship, thereby protecting the elder's authority and well-being. This provided a crucial layer of personal security, ensuring that those who had dedicated their lives to the craft were not left vulnerable to the whims of younger, less disciplined individuals. The Guild's power was a constant reminder to all its members, regardless of age, that mutual respect and adherence to the rules were paramount. In essence, the legal and protective advocacy offered by medieval guilds was a comprehensive safety net that complemented their more direct forms of welfare. It ensured that aging members, even when their individual capacities might be diminishing, were not left exposed to the rigors of a challenging society. They retained their legal standing, their property, their dignity, and their place within the economic and social structure. All through the unwavering support of the brotherhood they had helped build. This robust system of protection meant that an old craftsman, perhaps frail and weary, could still face the world with confidence, knowing that the collective strength of his guild stood firmly behind him. This was not just about individual instances of help. It was about establishing a framework of enduring security and justice for those who had contributed so much. Number 7. Legacy and educational roles. The medieval world moved at a different pace, and knowledge, especially practical craft knowledge, was not easily disseminated through books or widespread schooling. It was passed down painstakingly from master to apprentice, often through decades of observation, practice, and correction. As members of a guild aged, they held an immense repository of this accumulated wisdom, and the guilds recognized the profound value in keeping these elder masters engaged through crucial legacy and educational roles. This was not merely a benevolent act, it was a strategic imperative for the guild's very survival and continued prosperity. For an aging master, perhaps a master carpenter with a lifetime of experience building timber-framed houses, the physical demands of the trade could become overwhelming. His grip might weaken, his eyesight might falter when cutting intricate joints, and the long hours spent hoisting heavy beams could become impossible. Yet his mind held a wealth of knowledge, the best types of wood for different stresses, the most efficient joinery techniques, the secrets of creating sturdy and beautiful structures that would last for centuries. The guild understood that losing this knowledge would be a catastrophic blow to the craft. Thus, the guild often formalized the role of elder masters as mentored and educators, even if they could no longer wield the hammer with the same youthful vigor. An old master carpenter might spend his days in the workshop, not lifting heavy timbers, but overseeing the work of apprentices and journeymen. He would watch their progress with a keen eye, offering quiet corrections, demonstrating a particular method for carving a decorative brace, or explaining why one type of wood was superior for a specific load-bearing element. He was the living embodiment of the guild's accumulated skill, a walking encyclopedia of techniques and traditions. This role gave him continued purpose and a vital connection to the craft he loved. It was a visible sign of respect and continued relevance, a stark contrast to being simply cast aside. Beyond day-to-day meriting, elder masters often played a crucial role in the formal examination process. When an apprentice sought to become a journeyman, or a journeyman aspired to master status, they had to present a masterpiece, a complex work demonstrating their skill, and undergo a rigorous oral examination. Who better to judge these creations than those who had perfected the craft over a lifetime? Elder masters serving on examination boards could assess the quality of the work with unparalleled expertise. They asked probing questions, not just about the technical execution, but about the underlying principles, the choice of materials, and the traditional methods. Their judgment was highly respected, their approval a coveted mark of true mastery. This role ensured that the standards of the guild remained exceptionally high, passed down through generations of practitioners. It also kept the elder masters intellectually engaged and at the very heart of the guild's core mission, maintaining excellence. Furthermore, elder members were often the custodians of guild secrets and traditions. Many guilds held proprietary knowledge, specific dyes for textile workers, unique blends for brewers, secret glazes for potters. This knowledge was zealously guarded to maintain a competitive edge. Elders were entrusted with this crucial information, passing it only to those deemed worthy within the guild's strict hierarchy. They might oversee the teaching of these secrets to new masters, ensuring fidelity to the established methods and preventing the knowledge from falling into unauthorized hands. This elevated their status within the guild, making them irreplaceable sources of institutional memory and wisdom. Consider a guild of dyers in Florence, a city renowned for its vibrant textiles. The process of creating certain rich reds or deep blues involved complex chemical knowledge, the precise timing of dipping fabrics, and the use of rare and expensive ingredients. An aging master dyer, whose hands might tremble too much for the delicate work, possessed the knowledge of these formulas and processes, passed down through generations of his family and from his own master. He would no longer be physically involved in the dyeing vats, but he would supervise the mixing of pigments, advise on the correct temperature of the water, and teach the subtle art of achieving a consistent shade. His presence ensured that the guild's reputation for superior dyes remained untarnished, and that the valuable secrets of the trade were accurately transmitted to the next generation of masters. This meant a continued income for him, perhaps a stipend from the guild, and a position of honor as a living library of their trade. Elders also played a vital role in maintaining the guild's public reputation and ethical standards. They were often called upon to mediate disputes between members, or to inspect finished goods for quality control. An old master baker might be less able to lift sacks of flour, but his palate and eye for a perfectly baked loaf remained sharp. He could inspect bread coming from the guild's ovens, ensuring it met the strict standards of weight, texture, and flavor, thereby protecting the guild's collective reputation for producing wholesome food. This function was crucial for public trust and for the guild's continued economic success. By entrusting these roles to elders, the guild affirmed their enduring value and relied on their unparalleled experience to uphold its collective honor. Many guilds also maintained comprehensive historical records and chronicles documenting their foundation, important events, and the lives of significant members. Elder masters often had the deepest knowledge of these histories. They could recount tales of past struggles and triumphs, preserving the guild's heritage and instilling a sense of continuity and pride in younger members. They might serve on committees that reviewed the guild's statutes, ensuring that new rules respected old traditions, or advised on the interpretation of ancient customs. This gave them a role as the guardians of the guild's identity, connecting the present generation with the legacy of those who came before them. The continued involvement in these educational and legacy roles was not just about providing a stipend or a place to sit. It was about preserving the dignity of the aging member. It acknowledged that their worth extended far beyond their physical capacity. It honored their accumulated wisdom and ensured that their lifetimes of dedication were not simply forgotten. For an old master, the ability to pass on his knowledge, to see the craft he loved continue to flourish through his guidance, was a profound source of meaning and satisfaction. It meant that his life's work had lasting impact, that his presence was still valued, and that his wisdom would shape the future of his chosen profession long after he was gone. This deep connection to the guild's purpose was a powerful form of support, extending beyond the material into the very core of human need for purpose and recognition. Number 6. Funeral arrangements and burial benefits. Death, in the medieval period, was a constant companion, an ever-present reality that shaped daily life and social structures. For medieval guilds, addressing the inevitability of death was not just a matter of practicality, but a deeply ingrained spiritual and communal obligation. Providing for the funeral arrangements and burial benefits of their aging and deceased members was a core function, reflecting the guild's role not just as a professional association, but as a religious fraternity. This support brought immense peace of mind to aging members and their families, assuring them of a dignified passing and continued spiritual care. For an old member of a guild, perhaps a venerable shoemaker in 15th century Bologna, the thought of his own mortality was often intertwined with concerns for his family. Would his widow and children be left destitute after his passing? Would he receive a proper Christian burial, a solemn and respectful send-off that was believed crucial for the journey of the soul? Guilds addressed these anxieties head-on, weaving funeral provisions into their very statutes. Upon the death of a member, the guild often took immediate responsibility for the funeral arrangements. This could include purchasing a coffin, arranging for the tolling of church bells, and ensuring the attendance of a priest to say a mass for the departed soul. The guild would often bear the costs of these provisions, relieving the surviving family of a significant financial burden at an already difficult time. This was especially critical for families of modest means, where the sudden expense of a funeral could plunge them into severe debt. The common chest, funded by member dues, fines, and charitable donations, was the repository for these expenses. Guild members themselves would participate actively in the funeral procession, carrying the coffin, attending the Mass, and demonstrating a collective mourning that honored the deceased and showed solidarity with the bereaved family. This visual display of guild unity reinforced the idea that no member, even in death, was ever truly alone. Beyond the immediate practicalities of the funeral, guilds also concerned themselves with the spiritual welfare of their deceased members. The medieval belief system placed great emphasis on prayers for the dead, masses offered for the repose of the soul, and the belief that such intercessions could shorten a soul's time in purgatory. Guilds, often dedicated to a patron saint, would regularly commission masses to be said for the souls of all deceased members. These were not just single events. They were often perpetual endowments or annual services. Some guilds even maintained their own altars or chapels within a local church, where prayers and masses could be offered continuously for their departed brethren. Consider the example of the Guild of Mercers in London. For centuries, they made provisions for chantry priests to say daily prayers for the souls of their departed members. This meant that even an aging mercer, who worried about his spiritual fate, could rest assured that his guild would continue to pray for him long after he was gone. This spiritual support was as vital, if not more so, than the material support. It offered comfort and a sense of continuity that transcended earthly life. The guild's commitment to these spiritual duties was a profound expression of its care for its members, extending even beyond the grave. Furthermore, guilds often provided for the support of the surviving family members of the deceased. While this is closely related to financial aid, the specific context of funeral and post-mortem support highlights the guild's commitment to dependence. If a master had a young widow and orphan children, the guild would step in to provide regular stipends or one-time grants to ensure they did not face immediate destitution. This might be a continuation of the financial aid the aging master received, now transferred to his family, or new support initiated upon his death. This provision was often written into the guild's statutes, a clear promise to its members that their loved ones would not be abandoned. The sense of security this provided for an aging member was immense. Imagine an old textile worker in Ghent, perhaps a weaver, whose body ached from years at the loom. He might worry about his ailing wife and their young grandchildren who lived with them. Knowing that his guild would ensure a proper burial, spiritual intercessions, and continued support for his family if he passed away lifted a heavy burden from his shoulders. It allowed him to face his final years with less anxiety about the future of his loved ones. This was a form of dignity in death, knowing that his life of labor and contribution to the guild would be honored, and that his legacy in terms of family welfare would be maintained. Some guilds even owned burial plots in churchyards or cemeteries, offering a communal resting place for their members. This not only ensured a dignified burial, but also fostered a sense of belonging even in death, keeping guild members together in their final sleep. The guild's commitment to these final rites reinforced the idea that membership was a lifelong, and indeed an afterlife-long bond. The very act of sharing a burial ground or having one's name inscribed alongside other guild members in a memorial book created a collective memory, a continuity of identity even after individual lives ended. The rules concerning funeral benefits were often meticulously detailed in guild ordinances. These might specify the number of candles to be lit, the number of masses to be said, the attendance requirements for guild members, and the exact sums to be paid to the priest and the family. Such detail reflects the importance placed on these provisions and the guild's desire to ensure fairness and consistency in honoring every departed member. This was not left to chance. It was a fundamental aspect of their communal responsibility. The provisions for funerals and burial benefits were a powerful testament to the holistic care provided by medieval guilds. They understood that aging members faced not just physical decline, but also profound existential questions about their mortality and the welfare of their loved ones. By addressing these concerns with practical support, spiritual comfort, and a commitment to family welfare, guilds offered a comprehensive system of care that extended beyond the bounds of earthly life. This vital function solidified the guild's role as a true community, a family of craftsmen bound by shared faith, profession, and mutual responsibility, even in the face of death. Number 5. Adapted work and continued employment. As the years piled on, the rigorous physical demands of many medieval crafts could become an insurmountable barrier for aging members. A master mason whose hands were racked with arthritis, a master cooper whose back could no longer lift heavy barrels, or a master weaver whose eyesight dimmed might find themselves increasingly unable to perform the core duties of their trade. Medieval guilds, however, recognized the inherent value of their elders' accumulated knowledge and experience, even if their physical strength waned. Instead of simply retiring them into idleness, guilds frequently found ways to provide adapted work and continued employment, offering a critical bridge between active labor and full retirement, and ensuring the elders maintained their purpose and connection to the craft. This was not merely a charitable act. It was a practical one. A guild's reputation rested on the quality of its products and the skill of its members. Elder masters, despite their physical limitations, possessed a lifetime of expertise. They had seen countless projects, solved innumerable problems, and understood the subtle nuances of their craft in ways no younger journeyman could. Their knowledge was an invaluable asset, too important to simply discard. One common adaptation was shifting aging members into supervisory or advisory roles. An old master carpenter, though no longer capable of hewing timbers himself, could oversee the work of apprentices and journeymen. He would walk through the workshop, observing, pointing out imperfections, suggesting improvements, and ensuring that the work met the guild's stringent quality standards. His experienced eye could spot a weak joint or an incorrectly planed surface, instantly preventing costly mistakes and upholding the guild's reputation. This role leveraged his mental acuity and deep understanding of the craft, keeping him engaged and vital to the workshop's operation. He became the ultimate quality control inspector, his wisdom ensuring the continued excellence of the guild's output. Similarly, an aging master goldsmith, whose hands might tremble too much for delicate filigree work, could be put in charge of the assaying process. He could meticulously check the purity of the metal, ensuring that the gold and silver used met the exacting standards of the guild. His reputation for honesty and precision, honed over decades, made him an ideal choice for a position of such trust. This allowed him to remain active, earn an income, and continue contributing his specialized knowledge to the guild, even if he no longer sat at the workbench crafting intricate pieces himself. He was performing a different but equally crucial service. For some crafts, particularly those involving teaching elders, could transition into full-time instructional roles. While all masters taught, an aging master might focus solely on the theoretical aspects of the craft, guiding apprentices through the initial stages of learning, explaining the principles of design or the history of their particular trade. This was especially relevant for complex crafts where a deep understanding of principles rather than just brute strength was paramount. A master painter, for instance, whose hand might no longer be steady enough for fine details, could teach apprentices about color theory, pigment mixing, or the techniques of preparing canvases, ensuring the traditions of the school were faithfully transmitted. Some guilds created specific lighter duties that were suitable for older members. A master baker, no longer able to lift heavy sacks of flour or tend the hot ovens for long shifts, might be assigned tasks like weighing ingredients, managing inventory, or tending the guild's accounts. These tasks, while perhaps less glamorous, were essential for the smooth operation of the business and required precision and reliability that older, experienced members could provide. The guild benefited from their diligence and accumulated wisdom in administrative matters, while the elder member maintained a steady income and a sense of continued contribution. Consider the worshipful company of drapers in London. An aging draper whose eyesight might no longer be keen enough to discern the subtle imperfections in bolts of cloth could be tasked with managing the guild's vast warehouses. He might be responsible for organizing the inventory, overseeing the receipt and dispatch of goods, or ensuring proper storage conditions. This administrative role, while less physically demanding, was critical to the guild's commercial operations. His long experience with different types of cloth, even if he couldn't visually inspect every thread, allowed him to identify patterns of supply and demand and ensure the smooth flow of valuable textiles. This was a valuable position that acknowledged his overall knowledge of the trade, not just his ability to cut and measure. The benefit of these adapted roles extended beyond the financial. For many medieval craftsmen, their identity was intrinsically linked to their work. To be idle was not just a financial hardship, but a profound blow to one's sense of self-worth and social standing. By providing continued, meaningful employment, guilds ensured that their aging members remained productive, respected members of the community. It allowed them to retain their dignity and status, demonstrating that their lifetime of contribution was valued and their accumulated wisdom was indispensable. They remained master in a true sense, even if their duties had evolved. These roles often came with a continued, albeit sometimes reduced, wage or stipend. This income was vital, supplementing any direct financial aid the guild might provide or reducing the need for it. It meant that the aging member could continue to contribute to their household, maintaining their independence and avoiding reliance solely on charity. The financial remuneration was not just for the work performed. It was also a tangible recognition of their enduring expertise and their continued presence within the guild's productive economy. The practice of adapted work also served to reinforce the intergenerational transfer of knowledge and skill. By having elders in supervisory or advisory capacities, younger members constantly benefited from their vast experience. This direct on-the-job mentorship was invaluable for maintaining the high standards of the craft and for preventing a decline in skills from one generation to the next. The presence of an old master in the workshop, even if he rarely lifted a tool, created an environment where apprentices and journeymen could always seek guidance, learn from past mistakes, and absorb the subtle lessons that only years of practice could teach. This system was a testament to the Guild's understanding of human nature and the long-term sustainability of their craft. They recognized that physical decline was inevitable, but intellectual and experiential wealth only grew with age. By strategically reassigning roles and responsibilities, they managed to tap into this immense reservoir of wisdom, ensuring that their aging members remained vital cogs in the machinery of the Guild, contributing their unique value until their very last days. It was a symbiotic relationship. The Guild gained from unparalleled expertise, and the elder members gained purpose, dignity, and continued means of support. Number 4. Community indulation and social fellowship. Beyond the practical provisions of money, housing, and adapted work, medieval guilds understood a deeply human need, the desire for belonging, for social connection, and for continued participation in the community that had defined one's life. As members aged, the risk of isolation grew, particularly if their physical abilities limited their movement or their immediate family structures shifted. Medieval guilds actively combated this potential solitude by fostering strong community integration and social fellowship, ensuring that their elder members remained central to the guild's vibrant social and spiritual life. A guild was, in many ways, a family. Members called each other brother or sister and participated in shared rituals and celebrations that went far beyond mere business transactions. For an aging member, this continued sense of belonging was invaluable. They might no longer be able to attend every arduous market day or spend long hours in the workshop, but their presence at guild meetings, feasts, and religious ceremonies was still highly valued and often actively encouraged. Guild feasts were a cornerstone of medieval social life, joyous occasions where members gathered often with their families to share food, drink, and camaraderie. For an elder, these events were crucial. They were often given places of honor at the high table, a visible sign of respect for their long service and accumulated wisdom. Here they could catch up with old friends, share stories, and simply enjoy the collective good cheer. These feasts were not merely about indulgence. They reinforced bonds, resolved minor disputes through convivial conversation, and renewed the sense of shared identity. An old master tanner, whose work life might have been solitary, could find himself surrounded by familiar faces, engaged in lively discussion, remembering old times. This actively prevented the loneliness that can often accompany old age. Many guilds were also deeply religious fraternities, dedicated to a patron saint and participating actively in the spiritual life of their town. They would organize processions on saint days, attend church services together, and contribute to the upkeep of altars or chapels. For an aging member who might rely on spiritual comfort more heavily in their later years, participation in these events was a profound source of solace and continued connection. An old master weaver, perhaps too frail to stand for long, could still sit with his guild brothers during a solemn mass, feeling the collective spirit of devotion. The shared prayers, the communal singing, and the public display of faith reinforced their shared values and provided a spiritual anchor. Attendance at regular guild meetings, even if an elder no longer held an official office, was also often encouraged. These meetings were where decisions were made, disputes were resolved, and the collective business of the guild was conducted. For an aging member, being present meant they remained informed, could offer advice when consulted, and continued to feel part of the decision-making body. Even if they no longer had a direct vote, their presence signaled their continued relevance and access to information, preventing them from feeling sidelined or forgotten. They could observe, listen, and occasionally interject their wisdom, quietly shaping the discussions. Consider the Brotherhood of Coopers in Bruges, a bustling Flemish city. An old cooper, perhaps in his 70s, might no longer be strong enough to wield the heavy tools needed for barrel making. But he would still attend the guild's weekly gathering at their hall. He would sit by the fire, listening to the younger masters discuss orders, apprenticeships, and market prices. When a particularly knotty problem arose, perhaps concerning the durability of certain timber, or a dispute with a wine merchant, the younger masters might turn to him, seeking his opinion. His decades of experience in the cooperage trade would be invaluable. This informal advisory role, recognized and respected by his peers, ensured he felt useful and valued, not just a recipient of charity. The guild hall itself often served as a social hub. It was a place where members could gather informally, play games, share a cup of ale, or simply sit in companionship. For an elder who might live alone or whose family had moved away, the guild hall provided a safe and familiar space where they could always find company and support. It was a place where their history was known, where their contributions were remembered, and where they were addressed by their title of master, a mark of their enduring status. This informal daily interaction was as important as the formal gatherings in preventing loneliness and maintaining social bonds. Some guilds even organized outings or pilgrimages, providing a chance for members, including elders who were able to travel together. These journeys fostered deep camaraderie and shared experiences, reinforcing the communal spirit of the guild. For an aging member, such an opportunity to travel and socialize might be otherwise unavailable, especially if their financial means were limited. These shared experiences deepened the sense of mutual support and lasting friendship among guild members. The communal aspect of guild life also created a powerful system of mutual aid and informal care. If an aging member fell ill, other guild members would often visit, bring food, or help with errands. This was not a formal, bureaucratic system. It was the natural outpouring of concern among people who considered themselves a close-knit community. This informal network of support ensured that elders were not neglected, that their needs were noticed, and that help was readily available from those who knew them best. This extended beyond sickness to general well-being. A young guildsman might help an old master with a chore he could no longer manage, not because of a guild rule, but out of respect and communal obligation. This emphasis on social fellowship and integration was a deliberate strategy to ensure the well-being of all members, especially as they aged. It acknowledged that human flourishing involves more than just material comfort. It requires a sense of belonging, purpose, and continued social interaction. By weaving their elders into the very fabric of their social and spiritual life, medieval guilds provided a profound level of support that addressed the emotional and communal needs of aging, allowing them to remain active, cherished members of their brotherhood or sisterhood until their final days. The shared history, the common rituals, and the daily camaraderie cemented these bonds, making the guild a genuine second family for its members. Number 3. Felstare and illness support. Life in the medieval era was fraught with peril, and illness, injury, and the frailties of old age could strike anyone, often without warning. Access to effective medical care was rudimentary for most, and the cost of what little was available could be prohibitive. For an aging member of a medieval guild, the prospect of falling ill and being unable to work, or worse, becoming a burden to their family, was a significant source of anxiety. Medieval guilds, however, recognized this vulnerability and established various forms of healthcare and illness support, offering a crucial safety net that protected their members from the worst consequences of infirmity. Guilds often began with a foundational principle of mutual aid. If a member fell ill, the collective would step in to assist. This meant not just financial relief, but practical care. Guild statutes frequently included provisions for members to visit sick brethren. Imagine an old master blacksmith in a busy English town, perhaps Norwich, who suddenly developed a crippling fever. He could not tend his forge, his income stopped, and his family might struggle to care for him without the guild. He could easily slide into destitution. But as a member of the Guild of Blacksmiths, his predicament would be quickly known. Other guild members, often appointed by the guild masters, would visit his home. They would bring food, perhaps paid for, from the common chest, and inquire about his needs. They might arrange for a local barber surgeon to attend him, paying the fee from guild funds. While medieval medicine was often limited, even basic care and remedies could make a difference. And the fact that these services were paid for by the guild lifted a heavy financial burden from the sick man and his family. The presence of fellow guild members, demonstrating their concern, also provided immense psychological comfort, ensuring the aging master did not feel abandoned in his time of need. Some larger or wealthier guilds even maintained their own infirmaries or almshouses, where sick or infirm members could be cared for. These were not hospitals in the modern sense, but rather communal living spaces where basic care, food, and shelter were provided. This was particularly beneficial for aging members who lived alone or whose families were unable to provide constant care. It offered a safe, clean environment and the assurance of regular meals and some form of attention. The Guild of Drapers in London, for instance, had well-documented provisions for sick and impoverished members within their almshouse, providing a refuge for those who could no longer care for themselves. The common chest of the Guild was a primary source of funding for these health provisions. Dues paid by members, fines collected for infractions, and bequests from wealthy benefactors all contributed to this fund. This communal pool of resources allowed the Guild to absorb the costs of illness for individual members, spreading the risk across the entire brotherhood. This was an early form of collective insurance, providing a vital safety net for an aging member whose individual resources might be exhausted by prolonged illness. Beyond direct medical costs, the Guild might also provide financial support to the family of an ailing member whose income had ceased. This stipend, paid from the common chest, would ensure that the household could continue to function, paying for food, rent, and other necessities while the master recovered, or if his illness was long-term, continued to support his dependents. This removed the immediate panic of financial ruin, allowing the family to focus on the care of their ailing patriarch. Consider an old master baker in a French town, perhaps ruin, who suffered a debilitating stroke. He could no longer stand by the ovens or knead dough. His guild, the Brotherhood of Bakers, would not only ensure he had a place to rest and some care, but would also provide a regular allowance to his wife. This allowance would allow her to buy necessary provisions and perhaps even hire a temporary hand to help manage the household or assist with light tasks in the bakery, maintaining the family's basic livelihood. This type of ongoing support was critical for long-term illness, which was a common occurrence for many aging individuals. Guilds also played a role in providing basic health knowledge and promoting hygiene, albeit within the context of medieval understanding. While not direct medical intervention, the communal living and working environments fostered by guilds, with their emphasis on order and communal responsibility, could indirectly contribute to better health outcomes. Guild rules about cleanliness in workshops or the provision of clean water, while primarily for quality control, also served a public health function. The very act of being part of a guild, knowing that a community stood ready to assist in times of sickness, provided immense psychological comfort. It reduced the fear of destitution and abandonment, which were real threats in a society without state-provided welfare. For an aging member, this security allowed them to face the uncertainties of life with greater peace of mind. They knew that if they fell ill, they would not be left to suffer alone, nor would their family be immediately plunged into poverty. This holistic approach to healthcare and illness support, combining practical assistance financial aid, and communal care reflected the deep bonds of mutual responsibility within medieval guilds. It was a tangible demonstration of their commitment to their members, ensuring that even in their most vulnerable moments, the aging craftsman was not forgotten but actively supported by the brotherhood he had helped build throughout his life. This system of care was a cornerstone of their communal identity, providing a vital layer of protection against the often brutal realities of medieval life and ensuring dignity even in infirmity. Number 2. Housing and shelter provisions. One of the most pressing concerns for any aging person, regardless of the era, is securing a safe and stable place to live. In the medieval period, with its fluctuating economy and often precarious living conditions, this concern was amplified for those whose ability to earn a living was diminishing. Medieval guilds recognized this fundamental need, and in many cases provided direct housing and shelter provisions for their aging members, ensuring they did not face destitution or homelessness in their final years. This went beyond merely financial aid. It was about guaranteeing a roof over their heads and a sense of security. Many guilds, particularly the wealthier and more established ones, invested in property. This might include their grand guild halls, which served as meeting places, administrative centers, and sometimes even temporary residences. But some guilds also owned specific properties designated as almshouses or hospices, specifically for the care of their impoverished or infirm members. These almshouses were typically small, individual dwellings or rooms within a larger complex, often clustered around a communal garden or chapel, providing a sense of community and quiet dignity. Imagine an old master baker in 14th century Paris. He had spent 50 years kneading dough, baking bread for the city. His wife had passed, and his children had moved away, leaving him alone and his small bakery business dwindling as his strength faded. The rent for his workshop and living quarters above it became a burden. Without the guild, he might face eviction with nowhere to go. However, as a long-standing member of the Guild of Bakers, he could appeal for entry into one of the guild's almshouses. These were typically funded by the guild's common chest, built up from member dues, fines, and significant donations or bequests from prosperous masters. Admission to an almshouse was usually reserved for those who had been members for many years, had contributed consistently to the guild, and were truly in need, often without other family support. Once admitted, the aging baker would be provided with a small private room, clean and warm, with a basic bed and perhaps a table. He would receive regular meals, often provided by the guild itself, and basic care if he needed it. This provision ensured he lived out his days in comfort and security, free from the worry of rent or hunger. The provision of almshouses was not just about basic shelter. It was about maintaining an elder's status and dignity. These were not public poorhouses, which carried a stigma. Instead, they were guild-specific residences, implying that those who resided there were esteemed members who had contributed their lives to the craft. Residents often continued to wear their guild livery or insignia, reinforcing their identity as a respected master, even if they were no longer actively working. This provided a crucial sense of continuity and belonging. Beyond full almshouses, some guilds offered rent assistance. If an aging member preferred to remain in their own home or with family, but struggled to meet the cost of rent, the guild might provide a regular stipend specifically for housing expenses. This flexible approach allowed members to maintain their preferred living arrangements while still receiving essential support. This was particularly useful for couples or those with dependents who needed to remain in a larger family home. Consider an elderly couple, a master weaver and his wife, in a German city, perhaps Cologne. Their weaving business had declined significantly, but they wished to stay in their small cottage, which had been their home for decades. The Guild of Weavers seeing their long service and their present need, would provide them with a regular sum from the common chest, specifically earmarked for their rent. This ensured they could remain in their familiar surroundings close to their community and memories without the stress of potential homelessness. This financial support for housing allowed them to maintain a semblance of their former life, preserving their autonomy and comfort. Some guild halls themselves, the central buildings of the brotherhoods, also provided temporary or even permanent shelter for a select few aging members. A small room might be set aside for an old beadle or a former master who had dedicated exceptional service to the guild and was now without a home. This was a direct extension of the guild's communal nature, literally bringing an elder into the heart of the guild's physical space. These arrangements were less common than dedicated almshouses, but highlight the guild's commitment to ensuring no long-standing member was left without shelter. The rules governing housing provisions were often detailed in guild statutes. These would outline eligibility criteria, the application process, and the expected conduct of residents in almshouses. This formalization demonstrated the serious commitment of guilds to this aspect of elder care. The collective decision-making process ensured that resources were allocated fairly and to those most in need. The psychological impact of secure housing for aging members cannot be overstated. It removed a fundamental layer of anxiety, allowing them to live out their later years with greater peace of mind. They were not dependent on the uncertain charity of strangers or the fluctuating goodwill of distant relatives. They were supported by their own brotherhood, a community they had contributed to throughout their working lives. This security also allowed family members to focus on other aspects of care, knowing that the primary need for shelter was met. The provision of housing and shelter was a profound expression of the guild's social responsibility. It moved beyond simple charity, creating a stable, dignified environment for its most vulnerable members. By offering this essential support, guilds ensured that their aging craftsmen, those who had built the very foundations of their crafts and their communities, were able to rest in peace and comfort, knowing that their lifetime of labor was honored with security and dignity in their final years. It was a tangible testament to the enduring bond and mutual commitment that defined medieval guild life. Number 1. Direct financial pensions and alms. In the often harsh realities of medieval life, where social safety nets as we understand them today were non-existent, the specter of poverty in old age loomed large. A craftsman who could no longer ply his trade due to physical decline or illness faced a dire future, dependence on unpredictable family charity begging, or even starvation. Medieval guilds, however, acted as powerful bulwarks against this despair, offering direct financial pensions and alms to their aging members. This was perhaps the most immediate and tangible form of support, providing a lifeline that ensured dignity and basic survival for those who had contributed a lifetime of labor to their craft. The system was rooted in the principle of mutual aid and collective responsibility. Guild members paid regular dues, often small sums, into a common chest or treasury. This chest was also bolstered by fines collected from members for infractions, gifts from wealthy benefactors, and bequests from deceased members. This collective fund was the bedrock of the guild's welfare provisions, including direct financial aid to its aging and infirm. When a master craftsman, perhaps a master tailor in 13th century London, reached an age where his hands trembled too much to sew fine seams, or his eyesight blurred to the point of being unable to cut patterns accurately, he could petition his guild for support. This was not charity in the modern sense, but a right earned through years of loyal membership and contribution. The process often involved a formal application to the guild masters, or a designated welfare committee. They would assess the applicant's need, verify their long-standing membership, and determine the appropriate level of support. The financial aid often took the form of a regular stipend or pension, paid weekly or monthly, ensuring a steady, predictable income for the aging member. This payment, though perhaps modest, was enough to cover basic necessities: food, fuel, for warmth, and sometimes a bit of rent. It was a lifeline that allowed the elder to maintain a semblance of independence, rather than becoming wholly dependent on their children or forced into a life of begging. This regular income was a profound source of peace of mind in a world where economic insecurity was a constant threat. Consider an old master, cordwainer in Ghent, a city famed for its leather goods. After decades of shaping and stitching shoes, his back was permanently stooped, and his fingers, once nimble, were gnarled with arthritis. He could no longer manage the long hours in his workshop. His wife was also elderly and ailing. He approached the Brotherhood of Cordwainers. After reviewing his long history of dues payments and his distinguished service to the guild, the masters agreed to grant him a weekly allowance from the common chest. This sum allowed him to buy bread and cheese, keep a small fire burning in his hearth, and ensure his wife also had enough to eat. It meant they could remain in their humble dwelling without the fear of being cast out onto the streets. Beyond regular pensions, guilds also provided one-off grants for emergencies. If an aging member faced an unexpected medical expense, a sudden repair needed for their home, or a personal crisis, the guild might step in with a lump sum payment. This flexibility ensured that aid was responsive to immediate acute needs, preventing minor crises from spiraling into total destitution for an already vulnerable individual. The financial provisions were not only for the aging members themselves, but also for their immediate dependents. If a master passed away, leaving behind a widow and orphaned children, the guild would often extend financial support to them. This might be a continuation of the deceased master's pension, or a new allowance for the family. This crucial benefit provided a layer of security for the family, ensuring they were not left to fend for themselves after the loss of the primary breadwinner. For an aging master, knowing his family would be cared for after his death was a profound source of comfort and peace of mind. It ensured that his lifetime of hard work would not lead to his loved ones facing ruin. The accountability of this system was critical. Guild records, often meticulously kept, would detail the names of recipients, the amounts paid, and the dates of disbursement. This transparency, along with the oversight of elected guild officials, ensured that funds were managed responsibly and that aid reached those truly in need. The system was based on trust and communal responsibility, a far cry from impersonal state-run welfare systems. Some guilds even had specific endowments or charitable trusts specifically for the support of their aged or impoverished members. Wealthy masters in their wills would often leave substantial sums to the guild with the express purpose of funding these welfare provisions. This demonstrated a deep commitment to the principle of paying it forward, ensuring that the security they had enjoyed in their working lives would extend to future generations of their brethren. The social and psychological impact of these direct financial pensions was immense. For an aging craftsman, it meant the preservation of their dignity. They were not beggars. They were recipients of a communal obligation, a benefit earned through their lifetime of contribution. It allowed them to live out their twilight years with less fear, more security, and a continued sense of belonging to the community they had helped build. This fundamental financial support was the bedrock upon which all other forms of guild assistance were built, providing a vital safety net in a world that offered few guarantees. It was a testament to the powerful social bonds and mutual care that defined medieval guild life.